Hey everyone, and welcome to reality. I'm Lev, and I'm here with William.
Hello, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about something different than usual. We're talking about parasomnia, which is things like talking in your sleep, sleepwalking, restless leg syndrome, things like that. That's the parasomnia, as in you're kind of asleep, but you're doing things still. And we find this very interesting, primarily because what does it say about the nature of dreams and consciousness if we can be asleep and acting at the same time? Do you find that similar, William? What do you find interesting about it?
Yeah, I first started thinking about this topic when I began acting out parts of my dreams. So I started looking into this phenomenon and realized that it has, there's a lot of aspects to it. There's a lot of different types of parasomnias, and it involves another interest of mine, which is dreaming and the relationship between sleep and dreams and memory and everything mental. So this topic kind of covers a lot of other topics, and it's helpful to try to integrate them and see what sort of theories and data can be produced from all of the evidence we can gather.
So, to give some better idea about parasomnias, so that we know what we're talking about here, um, let's just start with the basic idea that any multicellular organism sleeps, or animal sleeps, that is. And at least of the higher level animals like mammals, they have REM and non-REM sleep. REM being just like your eyes are moving quick and your physiological state's more like when you're awake, but you're still sleeping. And non-REM sleep, which is just everything else during sleep. And this cycles throughout the night several times, and you can dream during either one. A parasomnia is when you no longer are acting paralyzed and you actually act and behave when you're sleeping during either REM or non-REM sleep. And there's different types of parasomnias depending on which stage of sleep you're in. Non-REM is usually things like sleepwalking and other like talking in your sleep, things like that. And parasomnias during REM sleep have to do with more like, say, having nightmares or um, having a PTSD episode in your sleep. That's when those sort of instances occur, and some of these more basic activities occur during REM sleep. And so parasomnia is anything to do with those. It could be pretty minor, like talking in your sleep, or it could be as severe as even driving out to the store and shoplifting. I mean, it really varies on the person. Do you have anything to add to that, William?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of examples you can find online of people experiencing parasomnias. Just a couple that I found was this guy who mistook his wife for a deer. This was a famous case. I don't know. I think they made it into a book or a movie or something. Anyway, he was um, sleeping and he thought that he was wrestling a deer and trying to kill this deer, but actually, in reality, he was trying to strangle his wife. And his wife had to go through a lot of effort to wake him up, and this caused the guy a lot of stress, obviously, because he was violent in his parasomnia. So they had to have separate rooms, and so this caused sometimes parasomnias cause real life harm and danger to people around the person with the disorder. Another example that I thought was really interesting was this woman named Lindsay. She was a sleepwalker, and she would leave the bed and she would walk around the house. And the unique thing about her was that she knew she was doing this. She was conscious, but she couldn't control herself. And that's scary because you have no, you know what you're doing, but you can't control yourself. It's like you're a zombie. So I think these are two very important cases, along with a lot of other cases you can think of, that are very singular in nature and can tell us a lot about what's going on with the mind and sleep and all sorts of aspects of the mind and how it functions when you're asleep.
I find those anecdotal cases to be pretty interesting. I do want to clarify, since I read the article more recently than you, that it was actually imagining he had a tick on himself and he was trying to scratch it off, but trying to grab it by its neck, but is actually trying to strangle his wife. And the name of the article was "The Man Who Took His Wife for a Deer," is a play on the book "The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat."
Oh, I see.
So, but it's the same idea, like that people imagine one thing in their dream, but they're doing something else when they're out in reality. So beyond just the mere interest and weirdness of this, there's scientific ways to think about this. So you know where I'm coming from, or so I do have graduate experience in psychology, especially memory, and it's really my primary area of interest is to talk about memory, and that sleep has a lot to do with that. And I'll give a quick background, like one or two theories about dreams and sleep. One being that dreams serve no function, they're just random content that gets played and that's it, it's no function. Another is that dreams are a way of replaying activities in your sleep and as a way to consolidate and strengthen memory. And other ideas are just merely to just reenact certain activities when threatened, so you don't have to practice when you're actually in danger. And those are the main things we would think about today in terms of why dreams occur. There are other theories, but these are most relevant to parasomnias that we're talking about here.
What do you think is the strongest evidence for memory consolidation, that theory?
Well, mostly evidence of studies when people are deprived of sleep or deprived of certain cycles within sleep, their memory is worsened if they're tested later, or their recall is worse on certain information based on what they were learning, or there's interference in their memories. It's just messier thinking, essentially, if you try to learn something and recall it later and you didn't have your sleep to help consolidate it. That's the best evidence I think there is, just correlating that when you lack sleep, you don't perform well with memory.
So there's tests you can do for people who have trouble sleeping. They can test their memory and then you can gather evidence.
Yeah, that'd be one way to go about doing it, because if it's true that dreams are about like consolidating and things like that, you should be able to provide information to somebody and test them on it later with sleep in between or not in between, and compare the two and see what the difference is. And if consolidation is a viable theory, you shouldn't notice that without sleep there is worse memory performance, and then it'll be a matter of figuring out why it is that way.
Can you maybe do a straight comparison between how much sleep you get and how good your memory is?
Yeah, I'm sure there's studies on like a direct comparison, even including amount of sleep. And there's a theory out there about like having sleep debt, the idea that when you don't get enough sleep, you do need to make it up in some way in any animal. That if you only had 4 hours of sleep a couple of nights, you'll need to catch up on it a different night and get more hours of sleep to make up for that. And that's an interesting thing, but that might have more to do with, say, the energy your body needs rather than memory per se. And this is where it gets really complicated. But I think parasomnias can be a way to study these questions about why you have dreams, or the way, if is consolidation, there should be some evidence that data or information is being put into a more organized form. Usually you can do that if somebody's awake. You tell them, like, oh, memorize a list of words this way. I don't know, like, say, rhyming words, and see how they do later. I mean, that's the way to see if that technique in some way involves consolidating memory better, the ways memory is consolidated. But you can't do that when somebody's sleeping, of course. You can't ask them to do a technique and then see how they do. Parasomnias could be a way to study this, because you're in some way interacting with what a person does in their mind when they sleep.
Okay, so getting back to parasomnia, let's assume that memory consolidation is what's happening during dreams, and the dream is an effect of that memory consolidation. Now we want to know, how is it that you can have a parasomnia related to your dream, such as sleepwalking or just saying things that you are saying in your dream, like out loud, like sleep talking. Maybe we want to get into the neuroscience here, because I think it relates to what's happening neurologically that allows you to actually move in accordance with your dream.
On that level, it has to do with, say, neurotransmitter release. Part of sleeping in the first place and what stage you're in has to do with which neurotransmitters are released. And even what neurotransmitters are released could say something about the content. For instance, if you know cortisol is connected with stress in waking, if cortisol is released during sleep, it might be some evidence that a stressful event is occurring within the mind. Since it's not actually happening, it's probably being represented in the mind, which in some way gives reason to think those are dreams. Or if you had a different neurotransmitter, say a release of dopamine out of nowhere, that seemed strange. I mean, this is just spitballing here, but that would be evidence that some event that usually occurs during waking has occurred during sleep. And those are ways to see what correlations occur between neurotransmitters and content of sleep and mental content.
Do you know if it's typical for parasomnias to result from like a more intense dream, or can it occur with just like very mild dreams as well?
Well, based on the reading that you and I have done, it doesn't seem that parasomnia really has to do with intensity of dream, because, well, some people don't even report having dreams during parasomnia, so it's hard to always say what intensity they have.
What I'm trying to get at is, how is it possible? Because normally we are paralyzed when we're sleeping, right?
Yeah.
How is it possible that we can move in accordance with our dreams? How do we go from a paralyzed state to an active state?
I think the simplest way to look at that is that it's a malfunction. It's not supposed to happen. So when it's occurring, it could be that your neurotransmitters are not releasing correctly, releasing too much, too little, or too soon, at the wrong time, and things like that, which could be why stress during the day and things like that can disrupt and cause problems with your sleep.
Do you know if there's evidence for that?
I can't think of anything specific offhand.
Do you know of any theories that include willpower? Like, it's you just switch it in with your will. You make a choice.
That would be very interesting. I really doubt that's something you could really affect. I mean, it had to be very indirect, if anything, but not like, oh, I want to have a parasomnia. I mean, well, one, because they're occurring during sleep, it would be hard to see how you could just will that, but could you prime yourself to wake up? I have no idea.
I heard that sleep apnea has something to do with this.
It, it can, but more so because of the disruption of sleep than it is because, well, maybe it does have to do with actual dream content, but it seems more to do with just disruption of sleep. In the same way, if you wake up close to when you have a dream, you're going to be more able to recall and say what it was, what you dreamed about. The real interesting thing I find is that it's not even so much how can this occur, because the brain is so complex that these malfunctions aren't really that big a deal, it seems, by and large. Tucking in your sleep isn't really going to do much harm to anyone. So if anything could go wrong, that's what you'd want to go wrong. It's better to fall asleep and then talk than it is to just have such a malfunction that you wake up and then walk off a cliff. That'd be really bad, of course. So parasomnias can be a way of looking at what is going on during sleep that normally can't be reported.
I understand that there's dysfunction in the muscles called muscle atonia. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, because your muscles lack tone, so they're not really do anything. They like flop around, if anything. The same way, if like you lift up somebody's arm and they're sleeping, you drop it, just flops down.
Oh, okay. So I have that as the relaxed state in REM.
Yes. And that's, in a way, that's saying, so here's more theoretical thinking here, that say that dreams are supposed to be consolidating information and at some way repeating certain activities, mentally speaking. And if you're repeating activities, there's going to be movement. So it would make sense that the system would hinder or disrupt movement in the first place. So if your body is forced to relax, it would almost be some evidence that your body is relaxing for something. And it doesn't seem merely to relax for less energy use. It seems to be relaxing so that you don't act out your dream. Because clearly you don't want to act out a dream of you fighting a werewolf with a spear and then like actually a werewolf in your dreams and fighting it off. And you don't want that to occur, but in your dream it might be useful if you're practicing, say, I don't know, like in a video game you're trying to practice fighting a werewolf or something. It could make sense to repeat that, but you wouldn't want to actually repeat it in real life.
Isn't it commonly held, like kind of like a common theory is that you sleep just because you're tired and you need to recharge?
I mean, that's like probably true to an extent, but it seems far too simplistic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of agreeing now. I think that because that's kind of how I thought when I didn't know much about sleep and dreams. I thought, well, at the end of the day, you get tired and you're just like mentally drained and you don't have any energy left. And so you need to go to sleep so your body can burn fat or whatever and give you more energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's really the main purpose of, not purpose, but main function of sleep. I think it probably has a lot more to do with at least, if not consolidating, just processing in some way all the data you've taken in during the day.
Yeah, if anything, it would be a benefit, or rather, if dreaming was a result of a mutation compared to animals that didn't dream, that were only sleeping to recharge, whatever that might mean, there's a clear evolutionary advantage if you're doing two processes at once rather than one. And memory is very survival oriented, that every single animal needs memory to some extent. Even insects need memory to a degree. It would almost seem natural that if your neurons are firing when you're asleep, whatever neural process is going on, that would have some benefit to the memory itself. It gets very speculative there, but it is reasonable to think that since behaviors are correlated with neural patterns, that merely repeating a neural pattern should have some effect on cognition.
I think it's possible from an evolutionary perspective that the more you can habituate or automatize complex actions, the better you'll survive, because you'll be able to make better use of your memory and then learn new things. So maybe evolution has created humans because we are the most efficient users of memory.
Although it is important to remember that that might be true for vivid dreams and sleepwalking with all these complex actions. But it is important to remember animals too have parasomnias. If you've ever observed a dog just move their mouth when they're sleeping or wiggle their feet, or a cat doing the same thing, that's also a parasomnia. And we could wonder, why are they having the parasomnia? Which, I mean, you would still go back to saying, well, they're probably trying to enhance or improve their memory through consolidation, that they're repeating the mental processes or neural processes that go on, maybe in a way that the parasomnia in a cat reflects their degree of complexity, mental complexity. I'm not aware of any cats that sleepwalk. And I don't know if there's even anecdotal evidence of cats sleepwalking, which would be interesting, but the lack of sleepwalking might indicate that, like I've been saying, that parasomnias could say something about dream content and mental content during sleep. It could be that they have less mental content, so therefore they do less complex activities during their sleep. And humans has very complex parasomnias, which would reflect that complex things are going on during sleep. It's just that there are parasomnias because your body's no longer paralyzed. But otherwise, you would almost say if mental content is necessary for action, then any complex action, at least in biological organisms, has some amount of mental content.
Maybe in higher animals.
True.
I mean, you're not arguing that like a worm has mental content, are you?
No, but that's a difficult question to answer. Not in any normal sense. Maybe for a worm, no. There's probably some minimum level of complexity for it to count as what we think of as mental content, like a mental representation or some cognitive representation of reality. Like even bees have some primitive representation of the world around them. And you could say they have a primitive mental content, while a worm might have even less. But that too is arguable, because it really depends on insect behavior and invertebrate behavior. It gets really complicated, but I don't know if anybody knows if they have parasomnias. And if they don't have parasomnias, that would be evidence they don't have mental content, at least during sleep, and maybe not during waking either.
Do we know what the least complex animal is that has parasomnia? Like we know like dogs like kind of think they're running in their sleep or something, but what about frogs or non-mammals? Are there any parasomnias in non-mammals?
That's what I would want to know for sure. Any animal I can think of that even has offhand that I know has REM sleep is a mouse or a rat. They even they have REM sleep. I don't know about reptiles. I don't know offhand, but they all have different sleep cycles. The most primitive thing, it's really hard to say.
Did you say that they've seen parasomnias in mice?
I'm not sure, but I know mice have REM and non-REM sleep.
It would be nice to know if at least a chimpanzee has mental imagery, because I know they can teach chimps some rudimentary language.
Mhm.
Maybe they can teach them what a mental image is.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. I'd be more interested, like if a monkey was sleepwalking, what would they even do?
So we were going to discuss some of the occult ideas related to this, and one of them is the zombie, because the zombie very much seems like a sleepwalker, and you can imagine, like, in prehistoric times, humans seeing their fellow humans walking around at night, like, and not knowing, not responding very well, and just kind of in a haze, and that's kind of like the zombie monster image. And you can kind of imagine that sleepwalking is the source of this idea of the zombie. But what if the zombie idea and sleepwalking is the normal state of lower animals who don't have self-awareness? What if what human sleepwalkers experience, maybe especially the types like Lindsay who know they're sleepwalking but can't control themselves, what if that's the state a dog is in normally, or a cat is in normally? They know, they see them, they're kind of like, they have this like half awareness of what they're doing, but they can't really control it. They're just, they just move around based on what their mind is doing and functioning, and they automatically act, but maybe they can like kind of have some direction over where they're looking or what they're focusing on.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it, a useful way to look at it. As I've been suggesting, having a parasomnia would suggest the ability to really have richer mental content. Like, if we're talking about like a true and complete dream where we're imagining that we went to school without clothes on, I mean, that's a really vivid dream, or very visual oriented, and nothing like we would say a cat even has. That if we can have those parasomnias, that's evidence that other creatures do not have that type of vividness to their awareness, their consciousness, identity. So maybe they are like zombies. The really interesting thing about zombies is that it's not just an observed phenomena. It's something that the voodoo religion in Haiti, they really believe in zombies. You can turn someone into a zombie. You give them a certain potion, they drink it, it basically puts them into this dream state where you can manipulate them and make them act as your slave. They'll do whatever you want them to, and you can keep them in that state by different techniques, I guess, shamanistic things that they believe they did, but essentially people were given a potion to be controlled. I mean, it's hard to say that how valid that is, and it's just very difficult to do. It's just an advanced form of hypnosis, but it would seem that you can eliminate like the vividness of someone's thinking such that even their wakeful states and their sleeping states are really vague and almost empty.
So it's a function of how vivid your awareness is, or how rich your awareness is.
Like, yeah, I would almost wonder, should we call that a zombie, like a parasomnia, or is that just reflecting that any state where you're not entirely self-aware, just kind of goes, and it doesn't really require any mental complexity behind it.
This gets into, we were talking about episodic memory a couple of days ago, and that made me think of, the Crow epistemology is a big thing in objectivism, and maybe the brain needs to be able to get to a large enough capacity where it can retain not only specific information about an episode, like the person, place, thing, maybe the time and that the day or whatever, but also you can retain the goal or the purpose of your action. And until you get to like maybe a human type of organism or brain, you can't retain enough information to become a zombie or a sleepwalker, because a sleepwalker has a purpose. Usually they got to move across the room to get the chair or do something on their writing desk. If you study these clinical examples, there's always something they're trying to do. And I think that relates to the Crow epistemology and the need for the ability to retain your purpose as well for acting.
Yeah, I would think even zombies, even if it's not real at all, even the idea of a zombie assumes that they can have a goal of some kind. And if you can believe that you're controlling somebody like a slave, it means that person's at least going towards the goal of, I don't know, satisfying your desires.
In the horror movies, the zombie's main goal is to kill and eat your brain. Mm-hmm. So it's singular. It has a singular purpose. But in a sleepwalker, they can have any number of purposes that their brain comes up with. Right. And I think people who are trying to communicate, like people who are awake and conscious and trying to communicate with the sleepwalker, can figure out what their purpose is and then redirect them even within the realm of that purpose. Like if they're trying to cross the room, you can say, oh, this way to the other side of the room, and then they'll follow you. So if you figure out what the sleepwalker's purpose is, then you can take control of them.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, because that's really emphasizing the fact that even a parasomnia to occur, there has to be some purpose, and even that kind of purpose presumes some sort of volitional consciousness underneath it all. That there's no reason this would even occur unless you had the means and the complexity behind it. That you couldn't have a parasomnia if you couldn't represent goals. That by having a parasomnia, you have some sort of goal representation. And even dogs would have some primitive goal representation. They can have really complex thoughts compared to many mammals.
I think this is similar to hypnosis, because the person who is under hypnosis is being controlled by the psychologist or whoever's putting them under hypnosis. And the only experience I've had with hypnosis was in high school when I went to a show, like a grad night show, and they had a hypnotist. And one of my friends was hypnotized, and he went on stage and he did silly things. But I think the hypnotist must give an initial command or goal to the people who are hypnotized. And then he'll say, like, you obey my commands or something like that. And then from that point on, that's the goal of the person under hypnosis, is to just do what this guy says. But yeah, I don't know if it's actually a parasomnia. Is the hypnotist actually reducing the state of consciousness to sleep?
We would almost wonder, though, is sleep really reducing your state of consciousness? if you can dream, is that really a reduction of your conscious awareness? Is it? It would almost seem that there isn't a reduction. There's only a reduction in some aspect of your awareness. But I don't understand why that would be. Why is it that you can do all these parasomnias without having any conscious awareness? That's a really peculiar thing, because I wouldn't want to think that, I mean, it'd be weird if it were true that what you dream has nothing to do with anything, that it really is just random all along, because, at least because you're not conscious. There might be something goal-oriented, but not enough to say that your dream has any responsibility for your mental content, or that there is mental content. It wouldn't be impossible just to have your neurons fire in a pattern just that move your muscles, and that's that. That it only resembles mental content because the muscles are moving in the same way. So that's the problem we would run into. A lot of this is just theorizing that requires experimentation to really know for sure any of this.
Maybe a better way to think of it is you're not reducing consciousness, you're reducing self-awareness. Maybe it's just a different state of awareness.
Yeah, that would make sense. Which gets into how I think parasomnias, hypnosis, and other weird phenomena are a good way to understand consciousness. That is not about just, oh, how many neurons can we turn off until you lose consciousness? Or how much of your brain can you remove until you no longer are able to think? It's more a matter of what's the nature of consciousness, not just what are the neurons correlating with consciousness. And these sort of studies can get at that. Because inherent in any of these questions is, are you aware of anything when you're doing these things?
I think the case of Lindsay shows that, at least anecdotally, you can be. You can be aware of doing them.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was presented as a unique case, though. I wanted to entertain kind of a wild idea, if you don't mind. Let's assume that you're in these dreams, and it's a vivid dream, and you have some control over them. Like lucid dreaming, where you can like kind of control your dream.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's technically a parasomnia or not, but I've experienced it. And my idea is that if you can make choices in your dreams, do those choices that you make then affect your like emotional reactions while you're conscious? Because then do those then become part of your value system? And so like if you're in a dream, like if you're in a lucid dream and you're choosing a particular woman to go out with, does that type of woman now become a value for you in real life? And then when you see that type of woman in real life, you fall in love with her?
Yeah, you made me think of something funny that I saw a guy on YouTube making a joke that, so he's sleeping and then all of a sudden his girlfriend wakes him up and she says, "You cheated on me." It's like, what? I've been here all night. You saw me go to bed with you. No, you cheated on me in my dream. And now I'm all angry at you. You have to apologize to me.
Yeah.
You made me think of that because you're saying, do your values change based on what you see in your dream? I would venture to say no, but at the same time, I should mention a dream I had once a while ago. I don't know if I've lucid dreamed. I don't know if it would fall into the definition. It's just a dream as I'm used to them. But I was playing the game Battlefield 1942, but I was in the game. I wasn't like playing it. I was in it, and I was flying a fighter jet or a fighter plane over Vietnam, I think. So obviously it's the times are all wrong, but I was firing at things and I crash landed. And then I remember landing in the water. And so I swam to a big nearby. There's a giant boat that was being run by the enemy. So I was like behind enemy lines, sticking onto the boat and acting like a spy and planting explosives. And I went old James Bond at the end, exploded the whole thing and swam away. And I'm not sure if that reflected way maybe a sense of courage I was developing in my memories, or I was even integrating, consolidating memories of what honor is or something. And I don't know, it could have affected my values later on once I woke up, because I really remember this dream pretty clearly, and it was interesting to me and I liked it. It was entertaining, if a bit bizarre, but like really entertaining, and things I've liked throughout my life, like James Bond in particular. And that's what you made me think of.
Yeah, I think I've had several vivid dreams that I remember to this day. I imagine most people do have those sorts of dreams, and maybe those are the kinds that do affect your value systems and could produce automated emotions in you. Like you were talking about the woman who thought her boyfriend was cheating. I mean, did she wake up and then like see her boyfriend and then just get angry?
And that was the joke. It wasn't real, but
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like that. It would seem like was she thinking about that the whole time, that she doesn't trust him, or just out of nowhere? I mean, obviously it's hypothetical, but I would almost guess if anything ever did happen like that, it's because they were thinking about it a lot already.
I mean, the other idea is that I think I've heard this before, is where they have a dream of their boyfriend cheating, like some girl, and it makes her suspicious because she thinks she doesn't like understand dreams, and she thinks it's like the cosmos telling her something, and so then she suspects that her boyfriend's cheating, but maybe all along she had been in real life, she had been seeing signs that her boyfriend was cheating, and she just dreamed it.
Yeah.
So it could be that when they connect with their dreams, it's because other things are evidence for that proposition.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think of that.
But if you were in a rock solid relationship and you have this weird dream like that, you'd probably laugh it off, I think. I mean, you wouldn't take it seriously. Well, I think that was an amazing discussion. I really enjoy psychological topics like this and the weird ideas. And I'm not a big student of the occult, but this was very interesting. And I think that if we can find other topics along these lines, we might get a lot of benefit out of studying them.
Yeah, I agree. It's very intellectually stimulating, I would say.
And a lot of these weird phenomenons, they actually have some basis in reality. Like we were talking about with the zombies. I mean, you might think horror movies are silly because they have like paranormal or supernatural creatures in them, but you can learn a lot from just taking an objective look at it and what's going on and trying to figure out, how did someone come up with this idea? There's something in the history of humanity that gave rise to this weird idea, and you can get a lot of benefit out of doing that. So that'll wrap it up for me. I thank you very much for the conversation, and I'll talk to you next time.
Yep, it was good talking. Bye, everyone.